Hi everybody, I'm Karl Wells. My guest today is a health explorer. He literally, these days, travels the world in search of the answer to health and happiness. And he's telling people about it in many different ways. He has a radio show, he has a television show, and these days he has a book out. It's called Health Explored, A Journey in Happiness, Health, and Humanity. What a beautiful title. And it's my pleasure to welcome the author to the program, Dr. Mike Wahl. Welcome, Mike.
Oh, thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
It's been a while since I've interviewed you, but you know what? The last time I interviewed you, you weren't a doctor.
I was not.
So what kind of doctor are you, Mike?
Yeah, I'm the most confusing type of doctor in the entire world because I have a PhD in medicine, so I'm a doctor of medicine, but I'm not a physician. But I teach medical students on how to be a doctor. So it becomes really confusing, but I'm basically a physiologist. I have studied all the basics of health, and what I do is I now teach the university, preparing the first and second year students with all the information they need to know about the human body, so when they go into practice they understand how these illnesses kind of manifest. It's been an interesting route. I started as a personal trainer, that's when I first met you, and then did graduate school while I had my business, and now I'm at Memorial.
Well, it sounds like very rewarding work.
It's some of the most rewarding work I've ever had. I always love to teach people. You know, it could be in the gym, showing people about exercises, but having a hand in training the next generation of physicians is incredible. And when we get to that level of teaching, I teach undergraduate as well, so like the biology students and kinesiology students and things like that. But when you get to the medical school, you're less of a teacher as much as a guide and a mentor. You're trying to help these students through. These are some of the best students we have, and we're trying to prepare them to take care of our friends, our family, our community, maybe even ourselves someday. So it's a nice responsibility.
So you've been interested in the topic of human health for a long, long time.
Yeah.
You know, when you were very young, I think.
Yeah.
What piqued your interest initially?
Well, they say you want success in life, have good parents. My parents were both very athletic. My mom was a national level diver, and my father was a very competitive skier out of the States. And my mom was actually a phys ed teacher. She went into a variety of other careers after, but her initial training was in phys ed. So I grew up and it was completely normal to have celery sticks with peanut butter and raisins and call them beetles on a log and do a push-up contest and with the family and go ski trips and all these other things that were really physically active. I was pushed, not in, but encouraged to go into sports, and I became a big athlete even though I was very small. And that was a really important part of my identity. In order to compete though, I had to spend time in the gym. I had to spend time training myself because I was very short compared to my friends, and I ended up making teams, but I was never a very good athlete. But what I realized was that if I took that same training program that I did and gave it to somebody with really good genetics, they became quite good. And so I got into strength coaching from there. And that sort of led to a whole series of different moves in my career. I spent time in the US after I graduated. I worked with a lot of hockey players, and then came back and started the gym. But my entire life, I've always been physically active. It's just part of who I am. So just remind people about the business you did have when we first met. Yeah, so we first started Definitions, myself and a business partner. It was back in 2002. And I remember that when we first started the business, it was a lot of personal training. It was more of a boutique style gym. And we had to take the people from the bank that were going to give us a loan around to show them downtown, first of all, and explain how people were willing to pay a whopping $20 an hour to be with a personal trainer. We were the first ones to do it. And I had gotten this concept from the time I had spent in New York City, which was sort of cutting edge when it came to fitness. And we came here and we started this personal training business, and it kind of snowballed a little bit because the people that came in there tended to be busy professionals, and a lot of them were involved in the corporate world. And in particular, one of them worked with oil rigs. And when he visited oil rigs, he was from away. He noticed that the food choices might not have been great, and the physical activity was really challenging in a remote environment. And he asked me to go out there and to start to counsel oil rig workers. And before we knew it, our business was on all the rigs in the area, started working with mining sites, started going to other parts of the world, and we grew quite large, and eventually we were acquired by a larger medical company, and I kind of kept on working in the field. Eventually, I got to a point where I was able to step away. And so I took some time to reflect and say, okay, that was a really rewarding part of my life. What do I want to do with this knowledge now that I've got the opportunity to have a chance to do exactly what I want? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I want to make a statement, and I want to get your reaction. I am of the view that if we could eliminate the consumption of alcohol, smoking, and recreational drugs, the use of all three of those things, we would eliminate all kinds of suffering, human ailments, and human diseases. It ain't going to happen. Mm-hmm. You and I know it's not going to happen, right?
Yep.
But what do you think we can do to at least mitigate the damage, the harm that these things are doing to our bodies?
Yeah, I mean, human beings respond to things that make us feel good. That's just human nature, right? And sometimes we don't think about future selves as much. And there's lots of things in our lives that can be damaging or challenging and very addictive, right? That can lead to poor health outcomes. I think that the biggest thing that I always took for granted, and now I'm realizing as I get older, because some of the things that I do for lifestyle seem second nature to me, and I enjoy doing, and while other people are kind of challenged with doing the same things, is the health literacy side of things. I think that people can't be told not to do something. I think they need to understand why they should or shouldn't do something. And then they can make the right choices depending on that. They can reduce certain things or increase positive behaviors if they need to. So I think ultimately the biggest thing we can do is to start empowering people with knowledge so that they can make those choices themselves. And that starts young, right? So when you see the book I wrote here, I always try and explain things with stories in simple terms we understand. And being a professor, I know that sometimes we take very technical information and give it to adults and we expect them to understand it. But when we teach a kid about a cow, we say the cow goes moo. And then we teach it has spots maybe, and then it produces milk. And then by the time you get done your biology degree, you know the exact species, but you slowly add that knowledge. We're never taught about health, really, until we decide to search it out in adulthood typically. But I think if we started off teaching about health from a very young age and made that a consistent part of our curriculum, which to me makes sense that it should be, considering it's a huge cost to the government, it's something that impacts every one of us, regardless of what our career interests are in life, then I think that we could get a head start with that, and then people taking health into their own hands because they feel empowered would have spin-off effects for long-term health outcomes, the economy, all sorts of different things. So I think it starts with education, and that's how people can make better choices.
Mm-hmm. Is there one thing that you could say, you should do this, and at least that one thing will make you feel better? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, I think that it's pay attention to what does make you feel good, that is healthy, mm-hmm. and that you enjoy doing. So when I say feel good, I feel like you enjoy the process, your body feels better, your mind feels better, there's a spring in your step. Whatever those things are, you need to find what those are, because those are the things that are going to be most likely to improve your health overall. And also, likewise, pay attention to the things that may seem to make you feel good initially, but over time, maybe 2 hours later after you have that meal that tasted good at the time, you start to feel a little sluggish and you're tired. I think we need to take a scientific approach with an N of 1 study, it's called. So I have one subject, and that's me. And I'm going to do things, and I'm going to see how I feel after each one, and pay attention to that. And what we find is when we're consistently doing things that help us, we'll notice an overall shift in day-to-day life in every minute of the day, even when we're not doing those things. So I would say, yes, experiment with yourself when it comes to health. There's no one-size-fits-all, but there are things that make us feel better, and if we can find those and stick to those, then that's how we're going to find our own little secret sauce.
Good, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the book,
yeah.
and also in a sense we're going to talk about the TV show, because many of these places you visited, you not only talk about in the book, but they're also on your TV series, Health Explored. How about this? I will name a country,
okay.
and you tell me one thing that you've learned in that country about health, happiness. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Happy to do that, yeah.
Okay. Bolivia.
Yeah, Bolivia was really interesting. I didn't know a lot about Bolivia. I don't know if a lot of people know a lot about Bolivia. Bolivia has a capital city called La Paz, which is the highest capital city in the world. And I learned a couple things. Number one is that sometimes it's just great to ask people and take the shot. So there was a gentleman his name is Gustavo Zubieta, Dr. Gustavo Zubieta. He's the world's best high altitude physician. He was on Dr. Sanjay Gupta's show. And I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and he agreed to let us shoot with him. And I was able to go up and do all of these exercise tests at high altitude. And what I found was that although I may be physically fit at this level, when I got there, my blood was 25% less red blood cells than I was supposed to have, and it was going to take me 4 months to adapt. But what I learned was the human body is this incredible thing that can adapt to different situations. He was saying that people have less risk of heart disease there because in order to get this oxygen to our heart, which is there's less oxygen at high altitude, they create new veins and arteries, and so therefore there's more roads. So if there's a traffic jam, a blockage on one, there's other routes to get there. And to me that was really, really interesting because he said that being at high altitude and being under a stressful situation is actually helpful for longevity. He took me out and showed me his 1950s Mercedes that he had without an ounce of rust on them because there wasn't enough oxygen to cause it to rust. And he said the same thing was with our bodies. They don't oxidize there. So what I found was it was just fascinating to see how the same person, I could live there for a period of time and my body could start to change on its own without me making any intention. It would just get better and adapt. And I thought that was really fascinating. And we're still friends. I spoke to him today.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. New Zealand.
I love New Zealand. New Zealand is an amazing place. It's so challenging to get to. It's just so far away, but the people are absolutely lovely. And of course, there's First Nations there, which is the Maori people. And the Maori were Polynesian heritage, and they left in their wakas, their canoes, and some ended up in Hawaii or Fiji, Tahiti, and some ended up in New Zealand, and they were called the Maori. What was interesting about the Maori is that when they introduce themselves formally, they'll say, my name is Mike, and this is my mountain, this is my canoe, this is my body of water. And they really identify with nature as part of who they are as people. I was down there working with a group of young offenders. These children had been involved with gangs, maybe in drugs, or challenges in life. And the way that their instructor or for the course explained it, he said, some people fall through the cracks, but these kids were born in the cracks, so they really didn't have a lot of opportunity. What they did was they connected them with their traditional practices. They connected them with the water, outrigging canoe, surfing. These are things that Polynesians created. And they used it as a metaphor for life. They said that, like surfing, sometimes you wipe out. That's like life. For every peak of a wave, there's a trough of the wave. There's ups and downs in life. Sometimes they're great waves, sometimes it's really rough, and sometimes it's calm and peaceful. And what they found with these kids is they used this challenge. They were able to connect with something that was part of their heritage, something that was quite exclusive. It was hard, it was an expensive sport to be part of. And they found that when they had this sense of community, they didn't relapse nearly as much, and it became very, very positive. And I remember I walked the volcano in the town early in the morning, and the mountain was just full of these young people running with these shirts that says "Live for More," and that was the name of the organization. And they really made a huge impact in their community. So what did I learn? I learned that it's really important for us to tap into our culture and not forget that and to value that. But secondly, that nature itself has a really powerful healing tool, and it can bring us together and form community, which can make our places we live even better.
Japan.
Oh, I love Japan. Japan is fascinating. Japan is so busy. I'm going to talk about Tokyo, just because I'm going to spin off what we just talked about New Zealand. I was in Tokyo, which is the largest city in the world, 30 million people. And it's high tech and everything's flashing and it's moving at a real pace. And we caught up a red-eye flight and we ended up filming that day. And we were there studying forest bathing. So people have probably heard of Shinrin-yoku. So we were going out to a park the next day to work with the founder of this, which is really hiking with all five senses. So what happens is they have things on the hike where you actually taste tea, and then they actually give you counseling, psychological counseling on the trail. They have berries you can eat along the way. They make the trees, they cut all the branches off, so visually it looks like this grid as you're walking through. They use different types of wood chips that smell a certain way and feel a certain way. They hide waterfalls on bridges so that you can only know it's there if they have a sign that says pay attention and listen, and then you notice it. So it's this really immersive experience. The day before we got there, though, we went walking through Tokyo. It was extremely busy, and I was exhausted. And I remember we went to a little park, Meijinju Garden it's called. And just going through that little bit of nature allowed me to recharge. And I realized that I've been in plains and big cities, and I hadn't had that nature that's in my backyard back home in Logie Bay. And it gave me that boost of energy. At the end of the night, we ended up going to a sushi restaurant with our local fixer, who's our production manager for the site, and he took us to a local spot. And I probably wouldn't have made it if it hadn't been for that recharge in nature. And while I was sitting there eating our sushi, I thought about something. And I pulled up my phone, and my father had a bucket list, and I always wanted to, we sort of agreed on the things that he wanted to do in life. He passed away at a young age, and one of the things on the list was have sushi in Japan. And so I was able to check off this bucket list item completely unintentionally, and I credited nature with being the thing that got me across the finish line. And it was very cool. And then the next day, I was really tuned in, so when I went to the forest bathing, I got it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. India.
India, for anybody who hasn't been before, it's a fascinating country. It moves at a pace that is really hard to comprehend when we come from a smaller place like here. It was wonderful. I went there to look at some of the mindfulness practices that people are, that use around the world. Yoga, mindfulness meditation, certain types of breathing. And I went to the mountains in the Himalayas, to a very yoga-centric place, and I learned from experts, and that was really great. But when I got into Delhi, it was still hard to understand how mindfulness could exist in a place that appeared so chaotic. And I ended up going to a slum in a school. And at that school, it was called the School of Happiness. And the principal of the school, who started the organization, got them to do yoga for us. And he explained that every day they teach them curriculum like math and English and reading and writing and all those things. But they also make them meditate. And the reason why is that it allows them to deal with the stress of their life circumstances. These kids were homeless or lived in slums. They had a really challenging life, a life that's so challenging it's hard for us to understand in our part of the world. And what he said to me, was interesting. He said, you come here and you might see chaos. And he goes, but because of practices like we have and like we do with these kids, we have order inside. He goes, you live in an orderly world, but a lot of you have chaos on the inside. He goes, so do me a favor, when you get home, use some of these techniques and have order, and you're going to live a great life. And that was really fascinating to me. The last thing about there was that they have a philosophy called seva, which is about selfless service, and that's very real. There was a lot of charity, a lot of generosity, and a lot of kindness. The hospitality we experienced there was like nowhere else.
Wow. The United States.
Yeah. United States. I had a very interesting moment. It's funny, me and you talking here, the last time we spoke was back in the late 2000s, before, I think 2009 or 2008. So, going back and reflecting is really fun. I went to the first place I got my first real job. So I went to school at UNB. So UNB had a very famous hockey team, University of New Brunswick, and we won nationals 4 years while I was there. I happened to be their strength coach because that was what I was doing in school, and I was fortunate enough to be on their coaching staff as that sort of strength coach. That got me a job in the States with this gentleman by the name of Ben Prentice, and he was being mentored by a world-famous physiologist from Canada who trained all sorts of pro hockey players in Canada. Long story short, he was just getting into training these pro athletes, and I decided to go off to graduate school and come to Newfoundland. I went back now 20 years later, and he has now trained athletes from every NHL team. And when we were there was Chris Kreider, captain of the Rangers, and Brian Shattenkirk, who just won the Cup for the Bruins, and Spencer Knight, who was a goalie for the Panthers when they won a couple years ago. And it was amazing to see what had happened. So what did I do? I learned that things change over time, but we still had this bond, this friendship, me and my original mentor. He opened the doors, he allowed us to film in his facility, but I also learned how quickly things are moving. All these things, I consider myself to be quite versed in exercise science, but when I went there and saw it, I couldn't believe it. It was just so high tech, and it was just so forward thinking. But the nice thing was, on the same episode that we featured this extreme hockey training, I also featured the mentor that I came to learn from, who is the physiologist who understands the theory that creates a lot of these practices. And I was able to blend both worlds. And I realized I was so fortunate to have these mentors along the way, and that those are the people that really shape your direction and your passion for doing something. And that's one thing I've been really grateful for, is to have an enthusiasm. I think it was instilled on me by people like those guys.
So, Mike, is there any place in the world you haven't been that you would really like to visit?
Yeah, there's a few, and it's funny, every time I can go back to places, but experiencing it in a different way. So I'll give you an example. I've been to Costa Rica like several times, like probably 6 times, but the last time I went there, I spent time with locals. I worked and I was visiting seniors that were 100-year-olds living in the jungle, like very, very isolated. So it was like a whole different place all over again. I've never been to Antarctica. I think it would be really cool to go to every continent. I haven't spent time there. I haven't spent much time in Africa. I've only spent time in Morocco. But there's a few places on my list that are still kind of looming, places I really want to see. I'd love to go see Patagonia. I love outdoors and I love nature. And I also love that part of the world. South America is a place that's really resonated with me. Their sort of approach towards life is very exuberant, and the kindness that sort of emanates from the people. But I think the biggest thing is that a lot of these places I've been to before, I've been fortunate to travel with my director, Braden King, who's become very close friends. We've worked on this project for a long time, but my wife has been able to join me on some trips. So there's a lot of places I want to go back with her and share that, so that we can have those memories together. Yeah.
I want to go back to what you were saying about, working out at high altitude and how you just weren't made for, or you weren't ready for that altitude because you live at this altitude. What happens when you take a person who lives at that altitude and you bring them here?
Yeah, they adapt. So this is why people train at a high altitude before, like the Boston Marathon, for example. So when they come down, at first they're kind of like superhuman in a way that they can carry more oxygen. So you've probably heard of blood doping in sports, where they have more blood. That's kind of what happens with these people. But over time, their body adjusts because their blood cells replace themselves every 3 months. So we start to produce less, and within a number of weeks, they start to go back down. And what they've found with their seniors is they like to keep them at high altitude as they get older, because it makes them a little bit more resilient. But it's funny because we adapt so quickly to different things. I went to Korea this year, and I went diving with these women called the Haenyeo divers. And these women are exceptional. They're called the mermaids, the last of the sea women. And in Korea, there were several wars, of course, and the men left, and then the women had to sustain the economy, and so they were the fisher people. But they learned to fish with their hands, and they fish without oxygen tanks. And so they could dive down up to 45 meters, 90 feet down, free diving, holding their breath. And then they can do it for up to 3 minutes or 4 minutes in freezing cold water, and then come all the way up. Now, I'm a decent swimmer. I spend a lot of time in the water. I'm a certified diver. So I went out with them to see what it was like. And the water was so cold that as soon as it hit my face, I started starting to choke. And I would dive down. I could get down 30 feet. I could touch a rock, not look for a shell, not look for any fish, that's for sure. And then just get up as quick as I could, get to the top and just... And they were down there for minutes, and they were completely adapted. And their spleens get larger, their muscles are more efficient, they can carry more oxygen in their body. And they've also...
Do their lungs get bigger?
Their lungs can handle more oxygen as well. And these women are like in their 80s sometimes that are able to do this. Wow. It's incredible. And it was a really humbling moment for me. I was at the surface. I was panting because when it's cold, you can't clear CO2. And all the women circled, and they do this type of breathing. It's a whistling, so the people on the beach can know they're there, but it also clears the CO2. So I was surrounded by 20 women going, whistle breathing, in the rough seas in the middle of off the coast of Korea. and they helped calm me down. And I was being protected by all these women. And I said they shouldn't be called the women of the sea. They should be called superwomen. And so that's another example. And I just love seeing it firsthand. You can read about it in books.
It sounds magical.
It was. I'll never
really
forget that
does.
moment. And I've had lots of moments like that, and I'm so grateful, and that's why we wanted to share it with the book, and then we wanted to share it with the documentary series, and even on the radio.
And if folks want to read about all of these adventures and learn some really important things about health, happiness, pick up a copy of Health Explored by Dr. Mike Wahl. It's a Breakwater book. It's available through Breakwater, online, and in bookstores. And I want to thank you, sir, for being on the program today.
Thank you so much.
It's good to see you again, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And that's it for this edition of Karl Wells Point to Point. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you again next time.